All right, everybody, we've got an exciting one today. Steve Jones from the Dunker Spot is here. Tune in, turn it up, let's go. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? We've got a very exciting episode today. Joining me, my podcasting cousin from across the pond, the lead writer for Celtics blog, the one and only Adam Taylor. Adam, how you doing today, man?
What's good? I'm good, man. I'm just looking in the camera. I'm like, yo, let me just grab a hat real quick while you're finishing the intros. I am in desperate need of a cut.
Hey, man, I say you should let it fly, but I'm going to let you do your thing. Make sure you're comfortable today because, as I said, it's an exciting one. We've got the co-host of the Dunker Spot with Nikias Duncan, part of 342 Productions with JJ Redick and crew, son of a former All-Star, 5-year NBA coaching experience. The one and only Steve Jones is here. Appreciate you being here, Steve.
Thanks for having me. I feel juiced and ready to go. The intro got me hyped. I feel like I got to really bring the heat today for y'all.
Was this the most dramatic intro you've seen?
Top five.
Top five.
I'm good with top five.
Steve, I see you everywhere here, everywhere on Twitter, everywhere on social media. So if we're gonna be top five, I'm taking that right now. So we're gonna try and keep that momentum building. And honestly, sometimes I like to start with a little report. I wanted to dig into a little bit more because I feel like Dunker Spot has just been taken off like a rocket ship these last couple of years, and it's really, really dope to see. But I ain't gonna lie, after last night's Celtics Thunder game, I kind of want to get right into it. I was looking through your thread earlier. You guys do such great work. I love the threads that you do breaking down plays throughout the game, clipping them, putting them on there. I see producer Greg in the shadows got it up there for those of you watching on YouTube. But let's just start here. Last night, Celtics Thunder felt like a playoff game, maybe a finals preview. I don't know if you're ready to jump on that ship yet. Some people feel like they're getting a little froggy, but let's just start here. What did you learn last night about the Celtics, specifically the Celtics in that game last night?
Well, when it comes specifically to the Celtics, I thought they were trying to find it on both ends. I thought coming into that matchup, I was thinking, especially after the Celtics played the Clippers and the Lakers, and they had kind of tapped back into the defensive bag of, we got a little trickery here. Here's Kristaps Porzingis guarding a non-shooter. Here's an insert player here on your big. We're going to make that a switch. Kristaps can still roam. I like that. That's really good for like your playoff defensive scheme versatility. That's really positive stuff. I was excited to see how that would look against OKC. The problem is the Thunder present such a unique challenge for teams that I don't necessarily blame the Celtics because of the way that the Thunder put the pressure on you to defend over and over again, to sustain your man-to-man coverage, to keep the ball in front. And so they were able to tweak it that a little bit, as in a way the Clippers and Lakers weren't, where, okay, now maybe Josh Giddey's on the wing and Kristaps Porzingis' help is there, but he's not deep. Or maybe, we've defended and switched a couple good actions. Here's another drive and the wings are clear, so we can't load up our early help that we're usually very good at when we're the Celtics. So that's where my mind was like, okay, how do I analyze this from the Boston perspective, where normally they're a much stronger defensive unit? Personnel-wise, they should match up a little bit better, but there is a little bit of a system shock to where you have to adjust to how the Thunder play. My thing was more the Boston Celtics offense in that game against the Thunder, where I was waiting for the pace and tempo to show up consistently, and it felt like they got trapped into let's play fast, which makes sense because you're playing the Thunder, but now you kind of get into a rhythm of one action, one pass, one shot. Or one pass, one attack, one shot, or maybe a drive and kick and it's a shot. And they didn't necessarily keep the same pressure on the Thunder's defense. So that's where I was keeping an eye on. What y'all think?
So one of the things that really you've touched on with the pace, I like to try and view basketball like life in a way, like everything can kind of be tied up. So it felt to me like the Thunder came in and implemented their pace, a pace of play that would work best for them, with Shai being so shifty and having those different gears that he can kind of cycle through depending on how the defensive coverage is coming up at him. So then when Boston get trapped into playing so fast, it's them not only trying to find their rhythm, but it's also them trying to counter how fast Oklahoma are playing. But really what you're doing is you're you're getting stuck in that honey trap and you're playing the way they want you to play, because transition basketball suits them a lot more than it suits Boston. So I think that pace point was a really, really important one, especially in the first quarter. They seemed to slow it down a bit in the second half, especially in the fourth. I felt like that's where Boston got their foot through the door, kind of managed to get their hand out the cookie jar a little bit and take control. But that first half, that first quarter especially, that pace for me was like it threw Jaylen Brown off rhythm. He didn't play like I know Keith, when I was speaking to Keith Smith about pace before, he calls it like personal space. Like you're playing with personal pace, right? Brown didn't have any personal pace. Tatum probably had a bit, but it wasn't as methodical as usual. So that was like my biggest takeaway. Just Oklahoma came in and just controlled the tempo of the game, which just opened up everything for them on the wing.
Yeah, I think specifically with Jaylen, it kind of messed him up a little bit, right? Because Jaylen is one of the best transition guys in the NBA. So in his mind, it's let's go, let's go, let's go. That's what he would like to do. Exactly. And so, and one of the things that Jaylen's gotten so good at, and I was saying this last night, we did a recap, me and Greg, after the game, that of course this is one of the nights when there's extra, non-Celtic eyeballs that are on the game, and that Jaylen Brown has a bad Jaylen Brown night, and he's been really, really good this year. And one of the things that he's been so much better about is actually playing, like you said, his own personal pace, but then also playing with patience, right? And finding that extra, whether sometimes it's just a hockey assist where it's just that extra, the simple pass. And then at times even making a next level read, which is certainly something that he's been working to improve. And last night, he just was kind of caught in between. And by the time you got to the end of the game, you saw him on even his wide open shots. You saw that free throw late that was, way off wide right. It affected him to the point that he was in his own head with his shot. And so I think it's really interesting what you talked about with the Thunder, where last night was two very contrasting styles. And the Thunder, for the first 85-90% of that game, kind of imposed their will with how to play. But what you said at the beginning, what I thought was most important for me, looking at it from putting, a silver lining from a Celtics perspective, is that they kind of felt their way through it. And I think, if that game had another 2 minutes, 3 minutes to it, if Kristaps had a half a size smaller foot, like I think the Celtics probably would have came away with that game. Because I think they were figuring it out, despite the fact they had two of their top six having, probably their worst games of the season. Would you agree with that?
No, I think that's a great point. And I think the biggest thing for me is even going back to the end of that first half where they were starting to find the rhythm and find their way. It was almost like, wait, this is kind of a bad time for halftime to occur, because Boston's kind of starting to figure it out and we're driving those close.
Especially Tatum turned it up at the end of that at the end of that first half.
And so we're in position. You guys want to go zone, we're cutting your zone up. We're putting, things together. I think for me, it also ties into sometimes it felt like they overcompensated against some of the switching. And that's something I'm keeping an eye on with Boston just as the season progresses. I'm not narrative man, but I can sense the frustration when it comes to the Celtics with, hey, some of this looks the same. Some of this fourth quarter stuff looks the same. It's too many threes. The threes don't necessarily bother me because they're generally quality looks they generate. I know sidestep, Tatum threes. I get it. But the fact that they're able to drive and kick and use their spacing to their advantage is fantastic. When they get slow and they start an action with 16 on the clock and the next option doesn't come with 9 on the clock, and now a team switches and, okay, let's get the mismatch at the elbow, and it takes forever to get to the elbow. Those are the possessions where I'm like, hey, can we not do those? Because when Boston makes quick decisions, they're a whole different team. They're a whole different team. They don't need a ton of actions. They run a lot of good stuff, but they don't need a ton to put pressure on you. Because if Derrick White comes off quick pick and roll, now we swing, now we make another quick decision in the pass, they look fantastic. How many of those possessions did we feel in that Thunder game?
In the fourth or just through?
Because just throughout.
Yeah, not many at all. It was and the worst part was they didn't really go to many actions either at times. Like it felt like they were trying to probe and find those driving kick actions, but the Thunder just did such a good job of taking away the drive and sliding their feet, taking away the middle of the floor, taking away the angles. And then, like you said, it went down slow. It went very methodical. And a lot of the times they could load up to the ball, get into the ball, and everything just starts to fall apart. It made me sad. I was very sad. Bearing in mind, I watched this today, not yesterday, because
Adam's in the UK. If you didn't know, Steve, so
that is a hashtag time difference.
Yeah, dude. So like, I'm waking up at like, well, today I'm not gonna lie. Today I slept in. I overslept, but like usually I'm waking up at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. watching the game, and that if it's bad like this one, like, I feel like I came away happy because they fought, like they got right to the end. They put up a fight, but there's times in it where you're like, man, this is gonna ruin my whole day.
Well, specifically looking at last
way.
night, Adam, that's like my point of like I walked away from that game like if this were, let's just say, humor me here, this were a finals preview, let's say this was game 1 of the finals or whatever, I would have walked away last night feeling like we're gonna beat this team in a series if that were the matchup.
I have that on a note.
Right. So that was for me what left me being able to rationalize, hey, you know what? It's one game. If this were put into the vacuum of a series, and that's where, we don't have to go down an Oklahoma City path, but that's what would worry me if I'm Oklahoma City long term. One game, they can beat absolutely anybody. I think in the series, they've got some areas that I think they should go make a trade and maybe, just start going for it. But I think if you're the Celtics, you were figuring it out and you would be okay long term. But on that kind of long-term note, Steve, I want to ask you, I was listening to one of the recent episodes of the Dunker Spot where you guys did your New Year's resolutions. Mm-hmm. And your New Year's resolution specifically for the Celtics was, and this kind of goes along with our conversation here, committing to play with pace and tempo consistently. Tell us more.
I just don't. It's the rare time when you don't feel the weight of their lineup. When you have this kind of versatility, where you have a Kristaps who can score when he's spaced, he can score and pick and pop, he can score and pick and roll. We know what Jason Tatum can do. The playmaking has gone up. You can give him the ball in the elbow, the post, and pick and roll, different things. Jaylen Brown, actually, it's very funny in my mind. I'm like, I feel good about what Jaylen Brown is doing, even though I have no stats to back it up with. Like, it just feels like last year was.
Welcome to us on Twitter. This is like a daily occurrence.
Last year felt like the stat year, and this year I'm like, hey, he's doing a lot of better things, but the stats are down. So it's like, nah, Franz Wagner's better. And I'm like, whoa, let's pump the brakes a little bit.
I got killed on Bleacher Report for saying that last year, but that I'd like Franz Wagner. Do you know how many people were calling me an idiot for even suggesting that you could get Franz and it'd be not an upgrade, but a better fit for like the overall spacing? I was very sad that day too.
I'm sorry you got booed that way.
Booed bad, dude. Bad.
They didn't want to hear any of that. Yeah. But you have Drew Holiday, you have Derrick White. Those guys can operate, drive closeouts. They can screen. They can do different things. When they limit themselves, especially specifically with that lineup, to just one pass, one pick and roll, one shot, you do a disservice. Like for me, when you're watching the Celtics, keep an eye on the defense. When they're having to rotate and roam, they are scrambling because the ball is moving to someone that they need to take away, especially with the way Derrick White's playing. When the Celtics slow everything down, they're communicating. They're happy. They're pointing. They're loading up. And for me, it's like, hey, Boston, you have this contrast where these possessions are so successful. Just keep doing that. Keep doing that. And that's not even before you get to the fact that they can go to movement. They can go to empty corner actions, empty side actions. They can tweak your defense. When they get away from that, it's like, why? Why did you stop?
So one of the things I just want to touch on here when you say pace, like when I think of pace, I don't think of how many possessions you're getting per 100, how many times you're getting up the floor. I think more of like the 0.5 kind of mentality, making fast decisions, playing with pace in terms of knowing whether you're going to pass, whether you're going to drive, whether you're going to come off a screen. Is that the type of pace you're discussing here, or are you discussing like, hey, no, we want you guys to run quicker? And
no, we're on the same page. I always kind of tab that under the tempo term because I stopped fighting with people on the word pace. Like, just I will just
I'm exactly the same.
I mean, it's not fun fighting with people over technical terms.
No. It's like, yeah, you got it. That's fine. You call that pace. That's transition. Tempo in the half court. So let's get into something. Let's get to the next part of it. Let's cycle our options with movement, with pace, with an idea in the half court. I think that for me, when Boston does that, how many teams can comfortably guard them?
I feel biased by saying this, but none.
I mean, with their top six, it's very hard, no matter what combination they're using, that And here's a question for you, because let's talk about Derrick White here for a minute. But one thing that we float out the idea is, should maybe Derrick White be initiating that offense a little bit more as far as, getting to that tempo, getting to that consistency? I don't know if that's the answer, but it's something that we've floated out there. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I do feel like Derrick White will get it up quicker and get you into something quicker. You'll have more of those possessions where you start with 20 on the clock when White does it. I think it's tough because you have such a group. You have 4 or 5 guys who can bring the ball up if they need be. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to just funnel it through one person. It's more, okay, what are you getting into? And then how quick is your decision? Adam mentioned the 0.5 concept. Jaylen Brown, very good in transition. Jaylen Brown bringing the ball up strong. Jaylen Brown driving and then kicking, what does that lead to? Does that lead to just a quick 3? Is that just a quick shot? Because you think about it, like, technically this team has all this spacing. They're 27th in drives per game, but they're 3rd in the league on catch and shoot field goal percentage. There's an in-between here. There's an in-between here where we can marry some of these concepts that you have. And I just feel like even when they do get it up quick, that may result in a quick shot. And then it's like, okay, I understand why you took that shot, but what if you now turn that into a drive and now someone else has to react? Then that's when I feel like Boston's at their best.
Secondary drives, secondary cuts, secondary like back screens and stuff. I want to touch on Brown for a moment. You mentioned Brown as what happens when he's the drive and kick guy, and 9 times out of 10, a drive into traffic for Jaylen Brown is never ideal. And that's not like, he's so good at so many other things. It's definitely not me trying to throw shade anywhere. But this season, like, again, I'm going to hold my hands up. I got smoked. What was it, about 18 months ago, Will, when I put out that, what was it, the play finisher article?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was, I got torn. I'll send you a link so you can read it. And I like it like now because I didn't like it at the time. I like it now because when I look at the way he's playing now, it kind of fits into the vision that we spoke about on this show. And I just want to get your thoughts. Is not taking away the playmaking from him, not saying, hey, we don't want the ball in your hands. We don't want you to make stuff happen, but we want you to make stuff happen based on what you're making the defense do. We're not going to ask you to manipulate the defense because that's just like, we don't need you to do that. What we need is for you to be focused on being a primary scorer, a featured scorer, whether that be driving, whether that be catching like rip throughs, coming into off the post, dropping your shoulder and curling into the mid range. And if the defense comes, make a read, just a simple next pass or like 2 passes along, and generate some playmaking from there. But focus on being like a primary scorer, and that feels like what he's doing this year, right? Like it's a lot more aggressive in terms of hunting his spots, hunting his shots, and then making a read out of there. Is this the best version of Jaylen Brown? Do you feel like this is the version that is the all NBA level guy, or would you have preferred to see him kind of be given the reps to expand that playmaking? For me, it's too late because they're a contending team and you don't start trying to develop someone's playmaking when you just swung for the fences on 2 massive trades.
I think that it's a really good context to get the best of both worlds to a degree, to where Jaylen Brown, you can improve with these playmaking reps. You will have opportunities, whether it's in pick and roll or when he's isolated or if he's spaced and gets a kick and drive, without having the responsibility, as you mentioned, of you have to do this. You have to make these plays for us. And so you can kind of track and allow him to make the reads and read the defense in a better way that helps your team, which I think is the positive of what he's done this year, to where, yes, he's been aggressive, and yes, he has the Jaylen Brown moments, but it doesn't feel as forced as it has at times, where I'm getting downhill, I'm making this play. He may get off it more than he used to. I think that's the plus.
Feels more featured.
Yes. And so it feels like he can now kind of sit back a little bit and make some more of those easier reads that maybe, if you're someone who has to be the engine, or, hey, this pick and rolls for you, this stagger's for you, you got to make this right read. Well, I have the room to take this shot, or I can keep going and make a right play. So I think he's kind of fitting better into the context. But again, having all those guys around him allows for that to kind of grow more naturally.
One of the things that stood out, and our producer Greg just put this in the chat here, is that it's been very apparent that in Mazzulla's rotations this year, he's kind of pairing Holiday and JT and doing his best to pair, White and Jaylen. Of course, last night, I think he paired Holiday and Brown at maybe the worst possible time at the beginning of the fourth quarter against the Thunder game. So that's a different conversation. But for the most part, it's been pretty consistently with those guys being able to, be paired together as a way to, because when you have these 6 guys, right, it's hard to find what that right balance is. And so, how do you think Derrick White and Jaylen playing together and maybe Tatum and Holiday together, how do you think those pairings have helped the Celtics try to find a good balance for their rotations?
I think it helps. Well, number one, I just think one of the things that I noticed early in the season was, they can just really flow into different things. So when you talk about the bench, I know we haven't brought them up, but those guys can just stay static in their roles because they're going to have people with them who will do that part of the job. And so I think it's more natural in the sense that it doesn't feel like it's Jaylen Brown's unit or it's Derrick White's unit or it's, hey, this person plus bench, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. They can kind of stick with their stuff. But I do think it's good for him to be with Derrick White in the sense that White will probably keep things organized to a degree. And allow him to get into his right spots. And that's not a knock on Drew, but Drew will occasionally be like, hey, I'm open. I took one dribble. I'm going to shoot this real quick. Or, hey, I'm going to drive. So that's where it's like, okay, do you need both of them together? Or is White a more natural fit to where I know what we're trying to get into? I can get you in the right spots. We can keep playing.
Before we go to the bench, I do want to talk about, what this team may additionally, if they need anything else. JJ Redick's planted his flag on Derrick White All-Star Campaign Island. Are you there yet? Are you joining the campaign, or where are you at with Derrick White's All-Star bid that's been making a lot of noise recently?
I'll tie it back to Adam's point. He was talking about life. So I'm on the computer and I'm checking prices.
Okay. We talking kayak? What we checking prices on? What
I haven't booked. Oh, insert your sponsor here. I haven't booked it yet. But this is interesting. He has a case. For me, it's just the numbers game for him out east. It's just a numbers game. And I don't know, we'll get the returns tomorrow of who's looking like they might get voted in. If there's someone that comes out of left field, gets voted in, it's like Dame and Donovan Mitchell. Well, hey, you might get squeezed there. Or this is my hypothetical I threw out to Nikias and he yelled at me and I fully understood.
Let's hear it.
And I don't think it's possible. But Jaylen Brown tends to get a lot of the fan vote. I don't think he would get the media support or the player support, so this probably wouldn't work. But if there's a world where Jaylen Brown just soaked up the votes and got voted in somehow, it's over.
Yeah, I don't think there's a world in which that happens, but I'm with you. I would love to see that happen, and I think it'll be interesting because you said it's a numbers game, right? Especially if it's Dame and Donovan, and then you got Maxey, Brunson, and Halliburton sitting there, we're already at 5 guards, right? And there's only 4 guard spots and 2 wild card spots, which, by the way, this should just go to 15 guys. It's ridiculous that we have 12 guys in the All-Star game. It's just really stupid. But it's going to be a numbers game. I'm with you. We've been waiting to get a little bit more because if Derrick White keeps shooting the ball he made a couple other ridiculous threes last night in that game. If he keeps shooting the ball this well, it's plus the defense that he plays. There is a real case, but like you said, might be a numbers game. Let's go to the bench for a little bit. You said that we haven't quite gotten there yet. We mentioned off air, we were talking about, you growing up in Portland, Peyton Pritchard being a Portland guy. When you look at this bench and the main rotation guys, let's take Al Horford off the bench, right? Because he's part of that kind of, fake pseudo starting 6 that the Celtics have.
He's God.
What'd you say?
He's God.
Yeah, but, Al Horford's our guy here. We're big Al Horford guys on the side here. But you got Peyton Pritchard, you got Sam Hauser, and then of course there's been, at least in Celtics circles, Cornette, Neemias Queta gets a lot of love. It's what do you do with that big man spot? How do you feel about the Celtics bench? Are there tweaks that needed, or are you comfortable with what they're rocking out there right now, night to night?
I'm comfortable with what they have, mainly because every single one of those guys on the bench knows exactly what they have to do to contribute to the team's success. And there's value in that. There's value in having a guy, a solid rotation. You know your job. You know who you're playing with. And some nights, if I have to decrease your minutes, you understand. If some nights you're playing well and I keep you hot and you stay in, you understand. So you can kind of get that motion. Now, I think playoff wise, you could argue there are some concerns if you subscribe to the notion. Actually, can I ask y'all a question real quick?
Yeah.
I feel like I have to ask this question to all Celtics people before I discuss my talking point on it. How do y'all feel about teams attacking Sam Hauser?
You want me to go with that? I
go ahead.
am completely fine with it. I think that there's a point where you attack somebody so often, or you get this in your head that you kind of take yourself out of your offensive sets, you take yourself out of your own rhythm because you're trying to attack what is a perceived weak point. And personally, I feel like Hauser's proved that he can slide his feet well enough to stay in front of a majority of second unit wings. He's strong enough to bang down low a little bit. I'm okay with that. There's going to be times where he's smoked, but for the majority of times, he's proven very capable. So if you want to attack him, by all means, throw your rhythm completely out of whack. Now, please,
I feel pretty similar to what Adam
proved
just
me
said.
wrong here.
No, I feel pretty similar to what you said. I mean, of course, don't look at last night with SGA. SGA was cooking everybody.
I said sometimes.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There's going to be certain examples
I
where it's
also
like,
prefaced
hell
it with
no,
second unit.
abort mission. Like we gotta switch this up. But I think generally, in the somewhat the ironic part is sometimes I think the Celtics, even though they've acknowledged like, oh, hey, teams are just going white boy hunting with Sam Hauser on the court and it throws them off and that actually helps us. Sometimes we do the same thing, which I'm like, you guys have talked about this being the strategy that doesn't work, yet occasionally we find ourselves in that same trap. But I think for the most part, Sam Hauser has proven that he can hold up well enough. And especially if he's, if he's shooting that thing like he can when he gets real hot, like he's just such a weapon on that offensive end that even if he gets beat once or twice, like I think it's gonna even out or work out in the positive for the Celtics.
That's fair. I figured I would ask because my only concern is in a playoff context against some of these top tier talents that are going to look to attack him, and those possessions are going to feel more important. And what does that do to your defense? And
that's fair.
Can you play him and Pritchard together if teams are going to hunt both of them?
Yeah.
And that's where my mind starts to spin. It's like, okay, you have those two that can be attacked. How many coverages do we feel comfortable with Luke Cornett? Do teams look to just poke holes? But they're only going to play so many minutes. It's the playoffs.
Right.
So you really only need them to fill this gap for this much time. Peyton Pritchard, obviously a great ball of energy. I feel like the Celtics made a lot of moves just to be like, hey, actually, we want you to play. Because it ran out of that zone of, hey, Peyton Pritchard wins Boston the game by scoring a bunch of points and changing the energy defensively to, hey, Peyton Pritchard, here's your job. You go ahead and do it. And so I've liked that portion of the program. I'm not on the side of the Celtics need to add anything. Like I wouldn't go get another big because it's going to be repetitive to a degree.
Right.
Which one are you going to get? Like you have KP who can do everything. You have Al. And depending on what you need, you can get it from Cater or Cornett. So I don't think that's the bit. More shooting sounds great, but you have Sam Hauser. So is that person ever going to play over Sam Hauser? Like, so that's where positionally in my mind, I'm like, okay, what do you need? You have energy guys that you just throw out there when you need a pack. Brissett, hey, please play hard. So I don't know what they would need in essence that they don't already have to a degree.
So the one thing I've kind of taken away from this is I like to call them single skill guys, specialists, right? It's a bit more sounds nicer when you say single skill, right? Sounds like you sound a little bit more professional than saying specialist. At least I like to believe so. But you've got Hauser, single skill guy, is your 3-point like catch and free guy. Maybe he's 3 and D, depending on matchup. Is he going up against second unit guys? As you said, in the playoffs, it's a shortened rotation. Most likely he's guarding starting caliber wings or he's getting switched on to guards. Pritchard, I mean, it's kind of unfair to call him a single skill guy because he can create off the dribble a little bit. He can push the tempo, but in essence, he's another floor spacer with a little bit of ball handling. Single skill. Then you got Brissett, Stevens, they're single skill defensively. Like people, you won't mind sagging off one of those two guys around the perimeter to help off on Tatum or Brown. And that was a concern of mine coming into the season, especially with Brissett. Overall, just with Brissett.
Adam, not a big Brissett guy.
I'm about to say.
But with Hauser, it was an issue, like, finding somebody that can give you a little bit of a second skill. seems like it could be valuable, but given where they are cap-wise, given what you'd have to give up to get somebody of that quality, to bring somebody in like that, that just makes no sense to me at this point in the season. But there are concerns for me more about bringing in one of these energy guys and what you lose offensively just to try and change that energy in the game.
So you're not a believer in the defender that lifts the unit with a little spice?
Yeah, I am, but I'm also not a believer in that being Lamar Stevens or Shea Brissett. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like there's definitely a defender that can come in and galvanize everybody, and his negativity on offense is completely outweighed by the impact and the change. I just don't feel like that guy is currently on Boston's deep bench.
Okay.
I might be the only guy here on an island because Brissett has done well for a few games, but I just think that, you know, the sun shines on anyone a couple of times a year. I live in England. It shines on me at least 10 days a year. You know what I mean?
I mean, when it comes to Brissett, I just have a hard time getting too worked up about him because to me, he's just an energy guy, right? Like, I think there's going to be, like, to
I
your
don't
point,
think the defense is there.
I think he's fine. I mean, I don't think. Listen, he's not. He's a 12th. He's an 11th guy on the team. Like, he's not going to be anything to write home about. He's the 11th guy on a team for a reason. But, like, to me, like Steve, what you were saying, like, are you worried about like Hauser getting hunted within a series? So you think about within a series, it becomes a chess match of like, okay, game 2, Hauser got cooked. Maybe he's cold right now. We can't play him. Could you take the 12 minutes that you were giving Hauser and give 8 of those to Brissett, and maybe Hauser you do throw in a very select spot where you know you're going to try and get him a couple looks, and that saves your defense. Like, I think he can do that just fine, and like just be like, hey man, you're going to play for 8 minutes. Go be a Tasmanian devil, run around like a crazy person, crash the glass, you know, try to bring us some energy. We've talked about it before, and this is where I kind of want to go, looking at, you know, the rest of the East and the Celtics getting back to the finals. Like, I think Miami might be a good series where Brissett gets some minutes just because he's a little bit tougher. He's going to play with this like certain level of intensity. I know Greg put in the chat that maybe last night would have been a matchup that you could have seen, you know, against the Thunder, a team like that maybe Brissett could have got some minutes in and made a difference. So when you look at the East, you know, what are some of the teams that you think could potentially give the Celtics the most trouble on their road back to a finals?
You know what's interesting? I was looking at it because I know you brought it up, and I was thinking, whoa, Boston's really done a really good job. They got the 1 seed. This path doesn't look very fun right now.
Yeah, it's not shaping up great right now.
None of them do.
Like, I'm just looking at it, I was like, okay, let's say 1 seed, you draw the Knicks first round. Okay, the Knicks seem to enjoy that battle for whatever reason, so that's fun. The 4-5 matchup is Miami and Orlando. Huh.
We've had some really fun times with them, Steve, recently. So I think that sounds great.
Now, Orlando, it did seem like y'all, the Celtics were like, enough of you guys. We're done with this.
They came out with a mission in that, like, home and home, whatever it was, 2-3 weeks ago.
We're done with that. But, you know, this version of Jimmy Butler trying to cycle through people, like, I don't know if you really want to deal with that. And then obviously Milwaukee and or Philadelphia. I think the Miami in the second round matchup would pique my eyebrow. Probably the second round would be the one where I'm just like, okay, this is where your work needs to pay off. I think if they get to the conference finals, they're going to have a hunger and determination. Obviously, depending on who they face, they may be matched there, but I like their odds. I like them against Milwaukee right now. Philly intrigues me, but I think in a series, Boston can find a way to limit or bother Maxey and or Embiid. I think that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to see. Like, okay, what happens when one of these people gets taken off the board for Philly? What do they look like then?
Yeah.
So that's where I like their odds right now, but they are going to have to improve on a couple things. One, can we feel more comfortable what we do against team switching? Because I feel like that's going to be a theme they're going to see eventually, whether it's second round or the conference finals. And then can we take the high level that we have and consistently execute and really work on moving the ball? Because if the playoffs slow down and now your offense slows down and now you're second guessing or bogging down, that just opens a window for a team. So that's where I'm like, hey, what do we got here?
So I'm gonna do something I haven't done in a while, and
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna announce my segue before I do it. I know Greg doesn't like it when I do this. I'm sorry, Greg. I've avoided it for a while, but I want to do it. So we're gonna talk about coaching, but to get there, I'm gonna say if the Celtics play the Sixers in the finals, I'm gonna be a little bit torn. Not because I like the Sixers, but because Nick Nurse is a legend in my city. So we have to, he won a few titles out here before he became big time. Now
You got to do it for the Nick Nurse brand. It's all about the
yeah,
brand.
you got to do. He won a few titles out here for my city before they got rid of the actual team that existed at the time. It doesn't exist now. So I want Nick Nurse to do well, not as well as I want the Celtics to do. Clearly, which leads us on to head coaching. Joe Mazzulla brings in his own coaching staff. We're talking about how the Celtics need to execute at a high level consistently during the postseason. A lot of people, especially Celtics fans that are still upset about the Ime Udoka situation and how that unfolded, haven't really adopted any love for Joe Mazzulla. There's a very big divide, as there is with Jaylen Brown, Jason. It's just a divided fan base right now. How much, as someone that's been a coach, someone that's kind of lived those reps on the sidelines, how much of being able to execute at that consistent level falls on the coach versus what falls on the players?
In today's game, it's a little different because this is no longer the era of I'm calling a set every time down. So you have to kind of build your offense to get the most out of your team and trust that they will make the right decisions and try and hammer home this is when we're at our best. And I think Joe Mazzulla doesn't get enough credit for that portion of the program when they actually are moving the ball, when they're, executing their sets with pace, elbow action or pick and roll, chin action. They run some very nice stuff. It's just when you have the optics of no timeouts, plus no ball movement, plus poor shot selection, plus too many threes, it's probably easier to point to the coach. But that freedom also gives you the good part. And I feel like sometimes people forget that part of it, to where these guys have the freedom to make these decisions, to execute these plays, to attack these matchups. Now, there are some times where I'm like, hey, I like that you are trying to attack this matchup. It's not quite working out. Why don't we pivot to something else? That is probably my biggest complaint with Joe Mazzulla sometimes, where it's like, you've got more stuff in your bag. Just go ahead and throw something else out there. I think you can shuffle it around a little bit. But I think he doesn't get enough credit for getting the best out of this team. Like the Porzingis slide in was pretty seamless, no?
Yeah.
He's gotten a whole lot of Porzingis offensively, gotten him comfortable quick. A lot of the questions I had were answered very early. I was like, oh, wow, he can roll, he can pop, he can be spaced, he can post. This is good. That's great. He's gotten Derrick White playing at a high level. So those are positives. And I think defensively, I don't know that he gets enough credit. Now, obviously, they have great personnel. So it's a little bit easier when you have great personnel to be able to be like, hey, if we can mix things up. But he's got these guys fighting. And when they execute defensively at a high level, they are very tough to deal with because now they get to run out and transition. And that's when they really flow the most. So I would say, what is it about Joe that people don't like? So I'm trying to figure it out. Like, the guy doesn't like to talk. He gets
so that's part of it. You can't win the Boston media. That's definitely part of it. And he's gotten better. 100%. It's the Boston media, man. And so, like, but here's the thing. And last year we were pretty critical of Joe on the show. I think as we got to the offseason, it more started to set in, like, man, he really was in such an unfair position to really be able to truly judge him on that first season, given everything with Ime. Damon Stoudemire leaves, 60% of the way through the season. He's working with guys that all basically left and went to Houston. You know what I mean? Like, it like the only thing that I've ever said that I think wish Brad had, and I'm not saying Brad didn't try to do this, but Brad should have got him more support somehow, some way as a coaching staff last. That's probably the one blemish that I would really point to in Brad Stevens' tenure. But, last year with Joe, I had a running joke that, after every game, they would just upload the AI to Joe Mazzulla and he'd give you these like super robotic answers that he thought were like, this is what a coach should say. I'm doing what a coach needs to do. And it was very off-putting. Like, it was. And it was because, like you said, a lot of these things that were being asked or mistakes that were being seen, some of it was repetitive. It was really it was a really tumultuous relationship. But I think this year he's had a chance to, like, he's said a lot of the right things. He's changed a lot. I think I'm very impressed with the growth that I've seen from Joe Mazzulla from the end of last year to where we are today. Like, I think there's a big difference. I still think there's some in Celtics, which, Twitter's whatever. Twitter is what it is, but it is where you get,
It's
a
an
lot
echo
of
chamber,
feedback.
man.
It is. And so you do get some that still be like, oh, Joe's not the guy. And, I don't know that he definitively is, but I definitely don't think he's definitely not the guy. I think to your point, Steve, I think there's a lot that Mazzulla has done positively that doesn't nearly get the light on it, as him not calling a timeout when Joe Schmo on the couch is, in between getting a beer and thinks that there should have been a timeout call. Like, that gets highlighted more on Twitter than any of the positives that you just mentioned.
Actually, you know what? I'll ask this question. Is it Joe, or is it just the fact that, I don't want to say Tatum Brown, but the Celtics just kind of have a similar issue, it feels?
It's the same issue for multiple coaches, Brad, M.A., Joe. And a lot of it for me was kind of looking back. It never felt like this at the moment. It was always like, man, why can't these guys just figure it out? But a lot of it for me now was these were young guys that found themselves being put in a position of not power, but like leadership early on in their careers that kind of broke out with a conference finals run, pushed LeBron to like the brink. If I remember correctly, it might be the year after. Anyway,
that was Tatum's rookie year.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden now you've kind of ousted Kyrie, you've ousted Hayward. This is your team, and part of me feels like they were in a big position where you're actually winning as well too early, and those bad habits were just so much harder to hammer out of you because there wasn't that star ahead of you that you could be pulled for a quarter or a half and then being like, right, let's go watch film. This is why we pulled you. It just didn't really exist for them. So I feel like that just became ingrained. And I think Joe's actually done the best job of kind of unwiring those bad habits over time. But I also think aging and kind of becoming more of a collective goal to win and not keep getting knocked out at the conference finals, that I think that's played a role as well.
Oh, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, of course.
So you have this super-powered lineup that's very, very good and does not lose very often. Well, last night was the second loss, right?
When they have all five of the starters, yeah.
So going forward, do you think the credit for all five of those guys playing well is going to be, oh boy, they sacrificed together, or Joe Mazzulla might have done something well?
They sacrificed together 100%.
Yeah, it's going to be the former. Joe's not going to get the credit that he deserves. And, like I said, I don't know that definitively he is the right guy, but I think he's certainly trending in that way more than he's trending in the other direction. But I think, and this is part that this is partly why we started some of this podcasting stuff, right? On our own, is like, I don't really love the Boston media. I grew up in Boston. I grew up listening to WEEI and listening to I know, but we want to do it our own way. We don't want to do it the way they do it because it sucks. Like, there's just no other way to say it. Like, I go back home and I check in, and not a lot of it's changed. Like, it's really, it's verbal clickbait basically is what you hear, when you're listening to WEI and stuff. And so I do think that it's just gonna be tough for Joe fighting an uphill battle until he wins, or until they win a championship. Then maybe he'll get some credit. But I always think that, with the Celtics team, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Steve. I think right now with this team that they've built, it's a 2-year window. They got to win a championship this year or next year. And then if they don't, that's when, most likely, I think it's Jaylen Brown and Joe Mazzulla. Those are probably the guys that you're going to see, fair or not. And I'm not even saying that that's going to be the right call, but I think that that's going to be where it leans to for changes to be made. Even if they make conference finals runs, maybe they lose in the finals, something's going to have to change. And I think those are going to be the scapegoats. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like that's accurate? Just that statement that this is a 2-year window for this team to win. Whit Grousbeck, the owner, has talked about, we got 5-6 years. I think that's BS. No one has 5-6 years in the NBA. I think with this specific group that they've put together, it's this year, and then next year there'll be a hell of a lot of pressure on them to win a championship.
I think I'd agree with that, especially with the changing landscape, and teams are always going to try and swing. And you especially look at the standings, like Minnesota, they feel pretty good. OKC is going to be the elephant in the room for X amount of years. Philadelphia is probably going to try every tool. So teams are always going to try and get better. So your best move doesn't necessarily guarantee we're going to be here for the next 5 years. As much as you love that, no. Even if you have success, we're chasing you now. We're coming after you. So the windows, I feel like you have more room to open them in today's NBA, but they are shorter. They are shorter because you don't know who's behind you. I think that the positive for Boston is usually when these I don't like to use the word super team. Adam, do you have a professional word for that one?
Exquisitely talented.
It's okay. I like that. So with these exquisitely talented teams that get put together, I'm starting to get the sense that year 2 is the year of that team really being itself. I point to Minnesota, honestly, number one example, where look at how you felt about them after year 1. And now look at where they're at now. And it's like, oh, yeah, teams can understand what they need with this group. So I think Boston being at this high of a level right now is a very good sign. The biggest thing is, can they cash in on it? And is this the best opportunity? That's where it gets tricky. Because I feel like they may end up being better next year, but this could be a world where this is their best shot.
There's less pressure this year. Next year, there's going to be a lot of pressure that I think comes with that. So I definitely agree with you on that point. Do you think they get it done this year? Let's just ask you. Do you think they get it done this year, Steve?
Oh, wow. On the spot. I'm so good with predictions. You know what? Yeah, let's call it.
He's on a Celtics podcast. He doesn't want to have to deal with all the mentions tomorrow, man. Be nice.
Don't worry about it. We never cut up clips like this and put them across the internet and tag you in it so people can find
with
you.
no context whatsoever. We're just, just that one very specific point.
Okay, well then if that's the case, this team will win a championship.
Producer Greg, go ahead, clip that, put it out right now. That will be the teaser for the podcast. But before we get you out of here, Steve, Adam, I know you had a technical question that you wanted to ask Steve, so I'm gonna let you take the floor.
Yeah, so I see you putting out I think this is the question we're on about. I see you putting out a bunch of threads. You're watching more basketball than what I think most humans can naturally consume. So I really just need to know for my own education and my own replication. What's your system, man? How are you getting through so many games in a day?
I'm a sick person.
Are you you got fast scrubbing? Are you downloading games without
how many TVs, how many
timeouts?
It's not 2 screens, contrary to Nikias. I usually will try and download a game and then zoom through free throws and just fast forward. Or I'm a big box score checker. So if player X didn't play, put that to the back of the pile. Or if it's a blowout, I might watch the first half where it was competitive, and then I might go. So it's more just I'm more in and out than it may seem sometimes.
Watching a whole game type of thing.
So I might watch, part of the first quarter, second quarter kind of so I'll zoom past it. But, or I'll have something in the background, and then I see something. I'm like, actually, you know what? Let me discuss this with the world.
I had to hop on here real quick just to follow up. So with the threads, I'm a big fan of your threads. Okay. Should I then assume that when the thread stops, that's when you're like, okay, I'm done with this game?
Yes. Literally. So sometimes I'll try and put a funny thing at the end, like the meme, I ain't reading all that. Happy for you. Or sad or whatever that one is. Or sometimes I will just cut bait. If I don't say the magic words, you know what? I'm probably leaving this game soon. So
third quarter, last clip's 20-point game. You get the deal.
Yeah.
So no all possession recaps, because I've tried all possession recaps and I just don't jive with them, man. You don't get the rhythm.
Yeah,
they should let me give me 1 year to get your all possessions league pass recap right. NBA. I can condense it in the same time, but also keep the rhythm and the flow, because you'll watch the all possession. It's like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then it just zooms 2 minutes ahead and you see a shot and you don't see the ball for 8 seconds. And I'm like, wait. Why does Jaylen Brown have it in the post now? What happened? How did he get it?
Where was the action? I'm trying to learn how teams run.
They'll fast forward through a half a second at half court.
Dude, that little glitch bothers the hell out of me when I try to watch it. It's what was the point of that? Why? And now I'm thinking about that, not even what's happening on the play.
And then I'm
trying to watch games, and a game will take me 2 hours 45 minutes to get through because I'm like, oh, that was good. How did that happen? Let me scrub back. Oh, okay. So this is what happened on ball. What happened off ball? Let me scrub back. And before you know it, a game that should have took you an hour to get through is like half your day is gone. It's already dark outside. I've got 20 million things to do, and I'm like, well, at least I know how those possessions worked out. So, like trying to figure out how someone's getting through more than one game in a day while still consuming what's happening on ball, what's happening off ball, how the schemes are working, how the rhythms flow. That's mind blowing to me. It's beyond the scope of my understanding.
If you get the sickness up here, it'll develop. Don't worry.
How much of your video work from your time in Memphis helps you to kind of digest all of this?
Oh, a lot. Like literally, like it was multitasking. Like if we were doing this right now, I would have the game right here. And so I got literally like 10 minutes to try and figure out what happened, especially first half when I got to put together a halftime edit. And I'm trying to pay attention to like free throws. I'm like, okay, I think this play was good. Let me double check and see and make sure. Oh no, Tony Allen fell down. Delete. That's not what I need. How many clips do I have? I have 6. I need 2 more. There's only a minute left. God, help me. Oh, wait, what just happened? Oh, I have to know everything that's going on. And then you're also in the background like, oh, what's this other game that's happening? Because we play them tomorrow. So yeah, that multitasking really enhanced the basketball illness for your boy.
I need someone to just start sending me requests for things like that so I can develop that, just send me like an email like, Ad, we're going to watch this game today. And at 10 minutes in to the first quarter, I need a report on 8 different things that worked well. And I need it in 30 minutes. I'll be like, dude, you're fucking insane. 30 minutes.
We all need more assistance. I think that's kind of what we're gonna leave this at. But Steve, appreciate you coming through today, man. Had a blast talking with you. We got to get you back on before the season ends. Please. But anything you want to shout out right now, playback rooms, everything else that you guys got going on. You guys are everywhere. So feel free to shout out anything that you got.
Crap, I'm so bad at self-promotion. Listen to the Dunker Spot pod. Me and Nikias, we drop twice a week. One of them is on JJ Redick's YouTube channel. So go subscribe, hit the like button, comment, whatever you got to do there. Watch playback. We're doing watch parties every night, me and Nikias. So it's free to log on. If you have League Pass, it's a double bonus. But come hang with us, talk about hoops. And yeah, that's all I got. Steve Jones 20, Twitter. I sometimes talk about stuff. I don't know, man.
Hey, go give our guy a like. If you're not, I'm sure you might already be following, but make sure if you're not, go link up with our guy Steve Jones here. Steve, appreciate you coming on. That's gonna do it for this episode of Green with Envy. As always, we're gonna play you out with some of Greg's music from his band down here in Austin, Texas. They are Black Sheep Optimists. We will catch y'all later. Peace.